Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Adventures. And today we're going to be doing another episode of Planet Zoo, and we'll be doing part 26, so we're really getting all these parts going. It's just wow, so many parts. It's almost like I'm losing my mind. So, we're going to be starting today with some really cool animals. They're not very big animals, no big bears or anything, but a bunch of really cool animals that I'm going to decide to talk about. So we're going to be starting with the Dwarf Mongoose by Megagamingrex Gaming and GiornoPizza. So you're going to have a little look at these guys here. A really wonderful little animals. So the common Dwarf Mongoose, or just known as the Dwarf Mongoose, is a small mongoose species native to Angola, northern Namibia, South Africa, Zambia, and East Africa. So these guys are pretty much similar to a normal mongoose, with these large pointed heads, small ears, a long tail, and these claws. But they can be distinguished from other mongooses by their size, and they are generally much smaller than other species, typically about 18 to 28 centimeters and 210 to 350 grams, and are in fact the smallest member of carnivora that lives in Africa. So they're not very, very big, but still really, really cool. And they have a very soft coat that can be all sorts of different colours. So they typically live in habitats such as dry grasslands, open forests, and bushland, up to about 1,000 meters in altitude. And they're especially common with areas with many termite mounds, and their favourite sleeping place, so they like to sleep in termite mounds. And they avoid dense forests and deserts, and can be found near settlements, and can be quite tame, believe it or not. So that's pretty cool. So these guys are similar to meerkats. They have like a strict hierarchical society where they are dominated by a dominant pair, and normally the oldest group members, and they all cooperate to help the pups rear pups and guard them from predators. And these guys are diurnal, so they tend to come out during the day. Young mongooses attain sexual maturity about 1 year of age, but delay dispersal, with males usually immigrating or moving with the company of their brothers at 2 to 3 years old. And dispersing males may join other groups, either as subordinates or by ousting the resident males. Or they may found new groups with unrelated dispersing individuals. So it's just kind of just trying to find and avoid that inbreeding. So pretty cool. These guys are also pretty territorial, and each group usually has an area of 30 to 60 hectares that they defend, which depends on the type of habitat. And they sleep at night in disused termite mounds, and occasionally sleep in like piles of stones, hollow trees, etc. And they mark their territory with glands and cheek glands and anal glands as latrines. And territories often overlap slightly, which can lead to conflicts between different groups, the larger group tending to win. So these guys have a pretty generalist diet as well. They tend to eat a lot of insects, including termites, grasshoppers, crickets, spiders, and beetle larvae. And they also eat spiders, scorpions, small lizards, snakes, small birds and rodents, and very occasionally berries. So they're very generalist in terms of their diet, which really does help them. So dwarf mongooses tend to breed during the wet season, which is between April and October. Between October and April, I mean. So they raise up to 3 litters in that time. Usually only the group's dominant female becomes pregnant, and she is responsible for 80% of the pups in the group. If conditions are good, subordinate males may also become pregnant, but these pups rarely survive. And after a gestation period of 53 days, 4 to 6 young are born, and they remained in the group below ground within the termite mound for the first 2 to 3 weeks. Normally one or more members in the group stay behind to babysit, while the group goes foraging, and subordinate females often produce milk to feed the dominant female's pups. And at 4 weeks of age, the pups begin accompanying the group, and all group members help provide them prey items till they are 10 weeks old. Another little interesting tidbit about dwarf mongooses is that they have a mutualistic friendship relationship with hornbills, in which hornbills will seek mongooses in order to for the two species to forage together, and they warn each other of raptors and nearby predators. So it's a really cool mutualistic relationship. So a really cute little guy. How can you not love a good mongoose? Little dwarf mongoose. And moving from one mongoose to another mongoose, we get the banded mongoose, also made by Megagamingrex Gaming and GiornoPizza. So look at that. Wonderful mongoose. So this is the banded mongoose, which is native to Sahel and southern Africa, which lives in savannas and open grasslands. places like that. And they are much larger than, of course, the dwarf mongoose, because this is not a dwarf. They can get between 30 and 45 centimeters long and weigh between 1.5 to 2.5 kilograms. And their tail is about 15 to 30 centimeters long. So these guys are pretty much found in large parts of eastern, southeastern, and South Africa, and there's also populations in West Africa, so they're pretty generalist in terms of their habitat, living through most of sub-Saharan Africa, except places like the Congo rainforest and the Namib Desert, and the southern parts of Africa, so they're pretty generalist range. And they live in these huge mixed sex groups of 7 to 40 individuals, which on average about 20 individuals. And they sleep together in dens, often abandoned termite mounds, and change dens frequently, every 2 to 3 days. While no refuge when they're not available and hard-pressed predators by predators such as African wild dogs, their group will form a compact arrangement where they lie in each other's with their heads facing outwards and upwards, and there's no strict hierarchy in these mongoose groups, and aggression is low. And sometimes mongooses may squabble over food, but that's really about it. Typically the one who claims the food first wins. Most aggression and hierarchical behavior occurs when when females are in estrus, so wanted to breed. So that's when the most aggression in the group happens. And most, females are usually not aggressive, but they do live in hierarchies based on age. So the oldest female has the earliest estrus period and has the largest litters usually. And while groups get too large, some females are forced out of the group by either older females or males. And the females may form new groups with subordinate males, so it's kind of just mix and match, which is pretty cool. Get a complex society. So these guys feed primarily on small insects, millipedes and beetles and small reptiles, pretty much whatever they can. Just anything small, including small lizards, small snakes, ground birds and eggs, and even babies, and just eggs, pretty much just really whatever. And unlike other social mongooses, all females in an abandoned mongoose group can breed, and they enter estrus about 10 days after giving birth, and are guarded by and mated by 1 to 3 dominant males. The dominant male monitors the female and aggressively defends them from subordinates, and while the males do most of the mating, the females often try to escape them and mate with other males in the group. The dominant male will spend 2 to 3 days guarding each female. A guarding male will snap at lunch and pounce on any males that come near, so they're quite aggressive, and even non-guarding males get to mate in a more secretive way. So the sneaking behavior that you see is similar to what in the fish species Neolamphorus punctula, however you pronounce it, do, and they try to sneak in while the dominant male kind of does his own thing. The subordinate male sneaks in and tries to get some mating. So really, really cool, interesting, complex society these social mongooses have. And let's see if we can find a baby. There should be babies here. Where's the baby? Where's the baby? There's the baby. It's very cute. So these guys can live in huge groups. Average about 20, but we can get up to 40. So yeah, really wonderful animal. So we're moving on to mongooses. And now we're moving on to little foxes. So this fox was made by Lowfound, and this is the Santa Cruz Island fox. Let's have a look at you. Really, really cool. So these guys are a small fox that are endemic to the Channel Islands, or 6 of the 8 Channel Islands of California. They are about 6 subspecies which live on each island, and they're generally pretty docile and have show little fear of humans. And believe it or not, actually play a important role of the spiritual lives of the native Channel Islanders. So these guys are pretty cool. So they're significantly smaller than the related grey fox, and it's the smallest fox in North America. Their head to body length is about 48 to 50 centimeters, shoulder height 12 to 15, and the tail's 11 to 9 centimeters, which is notably shorter than the 27 to 44 centimeter tail of the grey fox. And the Isla fox weighs between 1 and 2.8 kilograms, and the males are always larger than the female. And you can see they get their name grey fox because of their grey face, along with the white fur on the underbelly. And they molt about once a year between August and November. So what's really cool about these guys is that they typically form monogamous pairs, which are frequently seen together during beginning in January and through the breeding season, from late February to early March. The gestation period for these guys is about 50 to 63 days, and the female island fox gives birth in a den, which typically has 1 to 5 pups, which we should find here. She's probably had some pups. See if we can find them. There's a little pup. Very, very cute. You can see there's little cute pups like these. And they're born in the spring and emerge from the den in early summer. And the mother lactates for 7 to 9 weeks. And sexual maturity for these guys reaches about 10 months, and they typically breed within their first year of life for females. Island foxes live for 4 to 6 years in the wild and up to 8 in captivity. So they kind of don't live too long, but they are wonderful little guys. So their preferred habitat is a complex layer of vegetation with high density of wood and fruiting shrubs, and they live in all sorts of island biomes, including temperate rainforests, grasslands, and usually their population is quite small. No island can support more than 1,000 foxes. And they're very, very generalist, like the mongooses. They eat fruits, insects, eggs, birds, crabs, lizards, small mammals, including deer mice. And the fox tends to move around by itself rather than in packs. They're generally nocturnal, although peaks of activity around dawn and dusk. And activity also fluctuates within the season, and it's more active during the day in summer than in winter. And the island fox, believe it or not, is not intimidated by humans, and although they first may show some aggression, they're quite easy to tame and generally quite docile. And they communicate using auditory, so hearing, olfactory, smell, and visual signals. And the dominant fox uses vocalizations such as staring and ear flattening will cause another fox to submit. Signs of dominance and submission are visual, such as facial expressions and body posture, and such as growling and things. They also mark their territory with urine and feces. So these guys are considered near threatened because of their small island habitat. So these usually no more populations. A lot of them is no more than 1,000. I think the biggest population is a little less than 1,850. And believe it or not, there's a big issue when a lot of these islands were cleared. Golden eagles would predate on these guys, which would cause a pretty high mortality rate. Also, feral pigs can be an issue for these guys. Introduced diseases since they live on an island, such as canine distemper, which actually killed 90% of the Santa Carolina foxes, reducing the population from 1,300 to 103 in 2000, so that's a pretty big thing. Such as diminished food supplies with introduced mammal species such as pigs, sheep, goats, and believe it or not, American bison. So there is a lot of conservation issues, but luckily they have been mostly rectified as much as they can. So they are considered okay. That's why they're considered near threatened. But still a wonderful group of animals. So moving on from these little foxhounds, we got another little antelope that's really cool. By phonetic mods, we have got the Chernu or the Tibetan antelope. So really, really cool animal. So the Chernu or the Tibetan antelope is a medium-sized bovid native to the Tibetan plateau. Fewer than 150,000 mature individuals left in the wild, but their population is thought to be increasing, so that's very good. So these guys are medium-sized antelope. They get between 83 centimeters at shoulder height in males and 74 in females. Males are significantly larger, as you can see, and they can weigh about 39 kilos compared to the 26 kilos of the females, and can be readily distinguished from the females because of these really, really big horns, and also being larger and a slightly more distinct coat like that. Really wonderful. So the males, you can see they have these really long curved horns that can measure 54 to 60 centimeters in length. And unlike caprines, these horns do not grow throughout their life, and they kind of just grow them and then they just stay. That's how it is. And they have these really cool guard hairs and a silky undercoat that they use to help protect them from the cold of the Tibetan plateau, which is really cool. So they're found around the Tibetan plateau in alpine areas in full steppe, and they inhabit Tibet. They're also found entirely in China, where they inhabit Tibet, Zhuhan, and a lot of other places. Also found in a few places in India, where they in the border. And they have a very special adaptation for living in this high alpine habitat, where they retain the fetal version of hemoglobin in adult animals. That means they are much more efficient at taking in oxygen from the breathing than other animals because they retain that. And they're the only species of mammal where this adaptation has been seen in, so that's really cool. So on the Tibetan plateau, they feed on grasses, sedges, forbs, and pretty much just whatever they can. And the native predators include wolves, lynxes, red foxes, and snow leopards, which prey on the young or the calves. So they're gregarious and sometimes move in herds of hundreds strong between the summer and winter pastures. And although they're most usually found in smaller groups of no more than 20 individuals, the females migrate 300 kilometers yearly to calving grounds in the summer, where they just give birth to a single calf that you can see here, which is very, very cute. And then they rejoin the males in the winter grounds in the late autumn. So rutting for these guys lasts between November and December, and males form harems of up to 12 females, although 1 and 4 are more common. 1, 2, 4, I mean. And drive off males with marking displays and all that. And mothers give birth to a single calf in June or July after a gestation period of about 6 months. The calves are born precocial, that means they are able to stand without 15 minutes of birth, and they're fully grown within 15 months and reach sexual maturity during their 2nd or 3rd year. Although females may remain with their mothers until they themselves give birth, males leave about 12 months within 12 months, in which time their horns are beginning to grow. And males determine status by their horn growth. So you can see the ones with the biggest horns tend to be the most respected and dominant males. And they have a long lifespan, even though we know that it's probably about 10 years from captive individuals. It's likely that the wild ones is maybe a little bit less. So these guys are protected by CITES at least, and are considered, I believe, near threatened, so there's not too much going on for them. And their populations are likely increasing. As I mentioned, there's about 150,000 living. So as long as we protect the habitat, which is going to be an issue with climate change, this alpine habitats might be at risk, but as long as that doesn't change too much, they should be good. Really, really wonderful group of animals. Good old Cherno. So now we're going to be moving on from... No, that's not what we wanted to do. We're going to be moving on from mammals to birds. So we have here the Galapagos penguin. So this one was made by Bent 2007 Wantanek. That's a long one. And GiornoPizza. Looks really nice though. So it's a wonderful Galapagos penguin. Look at this one running, and you see the babies. So these are penguins that are endemic to the Galapagos Islands, found in Ecuador, and the only penguin that are found north of the equator. So most of them inhabit Fernandina Island and the west coast of Isabella Island, with the cool waters of the Humboldt and Cromwell currents able to survive despite the tropical latitude. So there's cold water coming up through the Galapagos that is able to sustain these guys. And they're one of the banded penguins, and the other species live mainly in mainland South America and Africa, and are one of the smallest penguins in the world, which get about 40 to 50 centimeters tall and weigh about 2.5 to 4.5 kilos, and are the second smallest penguin after the little blue penguin, which I love. So these guys, despite the warm environment, they have developed techniques to stay cool. So they have the feathers on their back, flippers and head are black, which helps repel heat. And the white belly with a stripe along down their eyes, down the neck and shin, which is pretty cool. Each penguin has only one mate, and they breed year round. They nest usually in caves and crevices to protection against predators and harsh environments. And they have an average lifespan about 15 to 20 years. And due to predation, this life expectancy in the wilds can be very significantly reduced. It's a really cool little bunch of animals. As I mentioned, only really found on the Galapagos. So they are monogamous, like other penguin species, but pairing for life, pretty much. And there's fewer than 1,000 breeding pairs of these guys in the wild, so that's why they are considered endangered. And a lot of the threats that these guys face are pretty sad, such as invasive species in the Galapagos, especially with humans, and introducing cats, dogs, and rats. Other species include rice rats, Galapagos hawks, and short-eared owls that can be predators of these guys, along with predators in the water, such as sharks, fur seals and sea lions. And another big guys, these get caught in nets. Also, oil pollution, depletion in fixed fish stocks, and avian malaria can be a big issue for these guys. But luckily they're doing alright. But look at these wonderful baby penguins. Aren't they wonderful and amazing? Really, really great. Really wonderful bunch of penguins. So now we're going to be moving on from another penguin to a mammal again, but this is a weird mammal. This was made by Leaf, Jen, Lion Rider, and NDP. So a big list. We have got the duck-billed platypus, also known as just the platypus. So these are a monotreme, so one of a very small group of mammals that are known to lay eggs, and they are native to Eastern Australia, including Tasmania. And the only living representation of their genus and family, and there were a bunch of other species that relate to these guys in the fossil record, but are the last living members, so a very distinct group. So they're one of only 5 extant monotremes. The other 4 are a species of echidnas, the only mammals to lay eggs instead of giving birth to live young. And like other monotremes, they sense their prey through electroreception, electrolocation. So you have echolocation, which is sound. This is electrolocation. So there's electrical impulses from their bill, which they use to sense movements in the waters, like nerves firing, things like that. So they can sense that, which is really cool. And they're also one of the few species of venomous mammals, with males having a small spur on their back legs here that you can't see on this model, that delivers a venom that can cause severe pain in human. And when they first discovered these guys, they thought they weren't real. They were like, this is not a real animal. You just sewed a duckbill onto an otter. But when they found they were real, everyone was just dumbfounded. So that's just really interesting. And the unique features of this platypus make it a very important species of study in evolutionary biology and are an icon to Australia. And they, until the earliest century, 20th century, they're hunted for their fur, but luckily are now protected to their range. And although captive breeding populations have only had limited success, the platypus is very vulnerable to things like pollution, if not under any immediate threat. So that's a very big issue. That's why they're considered near threatened. Luckily, they're legally protected in all states where they occur, but only listed as an endangered species in South Australia, and a class was near threatened by the IUCN. So the big issue for these guys, as I mentioned, and they get pretty big too. They get between 0.7 and 2.4 kilos, with females averaging about 43 centimeters, while males get slightly larger at 50. And as I mentioned, they have that really interesting venom. And they live in these very, very shallow waters across Tasmania and also on Kangaroo Island, parts of southern and eastern Australia, where they just use it to sense. They live in shallow waters because often it's very brackish and they can't see. So often that's why they use electroreception. Which is really cool. And believe it or not, in captivity they can live up to 17 years of age, and wild specimens have recaptured at 11 years old. These guys are naturally predated on by snakes, water rats, goannas, hawks, owls, and eagles. But the low platypus numbers in Northern Australia is possibly due to predation by crocodiles. And the introduction of red foxes in 1845 for hunting has had some impact on their mainland population, so that's another predator for them. And they have a big home range of up to 7 kilometers with males, home range overlapping with 3 or 4 females usually. Yeah, still a wonderful animal. And as I mentioned, they use that to detect things. Their diet includes annelid worms, insect larvae, freshwater shrimps, and yabbies, or freshwater crayfish. And they need to eat about 20% of their weight every day, which requires to spend about 12 days foraging. So as I mentioned, these guys are one of the very few egg-laying mammals. They have a single breeding season between June and October, where they kind of mate and find their babies. Make their babies, actually. So they often live in a simple burrow outside the mating season, with the entrances about 30 centimeters above the water level. But after that, they construct a deeper, more elaborate burrow that's up to 20 meters and blocked with plugs, which is safeguard against rising waters of predators. And the males take no part in breeding, but the females will often lay their eggs and keep it in there, and then Once the eggs hatch, they have kind of like modified sweat glands. They produce milk from. The babies will crawl up and drink from these sweat glands, which is pretty cool. Very interesting in terms of ecology. But yeah, they are doing okay at the moment, but it's very likely that pollution and things like climate change could have impacts on their populations, especially like local populations. Luckily, they have a very wide range. They are safe-ish, but we need to make sure. Obviously, they are protected, so they are well conserved. Really wonderful group of animals. I really like them. So now we're going to move on to, from the duck-billed platypus, we're going to move to the Persian leopard. So this one was made by Havoc1199, Gaboni, and Megagamingrex Gaming. So we have got the Persian leopard. So the Persian leopard is a subspecies of leopard that is native to Turkey, the Caucasus, southern Russia, Iran, Turkmenistan, and Afghanistan. And an endangered population. The population is estimated between 871 and 1,290 mature individuals and is declining, sadly. So they have these greyish skins with these large rosettes on their flanks, and they're actually one of the largest subspecies of leopard. They can get up to 58 centimeters in body length with 192 centimeter tail and a 94 centimeter long 94 centimeter long skull and weigh up to 60 kilograms. I read that wrong. So the habitat of these guys is typically like subalpine meadows, temperate broadleaf forests and mixed forests, and ravines from 600 to 380 meters above sea level, and found in the Lesser Caucasus as well. It's a very generous habitat, especially these uplands and meadows and things like that. So they have been sighted around. Iran is also considered a stronghold for these guys, with populations, 74 of 204 population areas they have. Protected areas, they have a population or individuals of Persian leopard. So they seem to be doing okay in those areas. But historically, they used to live all over. They even lived in Turkey, places like that, all over the Middle East. So they mainly prey on things such as wild goats, mouflons, wild boar, roe deer, Indian crested porcupines, and Eurasian hares, and occasionally have been seen attacking ognars. So those are a species of horse. That's really interesting. And sadly, these guys are threatened by poaching, habitat destruction, agricultural expansion, infrastructure, and such things. So they are protected, but they are considered endangered. So, and plus they live in Iran and Iraq. So there is sadly some war, and often that can feed into each other. So such as poaching can try to fund war efforts and things like that. So it's not very good. But look at these cute babies. They're sadly endangered, like most large carnivores. But their populations, Iran has about 850 of them, so they are at least in good numbers there. Other places such as Turkey has fewer than 5. And there have been attempts to reintroduce them into Turkmenistan and other places. And there is about 112 captive Persian leopards worldwide, consisting of 48 males, 50 females, and 5 unsexed individuals less than 12 months old within the Endangered Species Program. So they at least are protected in some form. I hope they don't go extinct, because they are a wonderful bunch. But you have to look at these cute babies. Very, very cute. Really wonderful. So now we're moving on to another cat. We have got the Bobcat, which is, believe it or not, also known as the Red Lynx. This one was done by Plastic Fork, so that's a really nice model. So these guys are a medium-sized cat that are native to North America. They range from southern Canada through most of the United States to down to Mexico. And are luckily considered least concerned because they're so common and have a wide distribution. So they have these really cool distinctive black bands on their forelegs, and such as these black tipped ears and all that, and a very adaptive predator living in places such as wooded areas, semi-deserts, urban areas, forest edges, and swampland environments. So a very generalist predator. But it remains in some of its original range, and populations are vulnerable with local extinctions from coyotes and domestic animals, but overall they're doing well. They reach a body length of up to 125 centimeters, so they are pretty big. and they can weigh up to about 6 to 18 kilograms, with an average of 9.6 kilograms for females and 15 for females. 15 for males, I mean. The largest recorded bobcat was 27 kilos, so that's pretty big. So, as I mentioned, they are pretty generalist. They pretty much eat whatever they can. Rabbits and hares, they'll hunt insects, chickens, geese, other birds, small rodents, and deer. And prey selection really just depends on their location and habitat, season and abundance, so they just eat what they can. And like most cats, these guys are largely solitary and live in large territories, and they is overlap with their ranges sometimes, but generally they tend to keep to themselves. And they use several methods to mark these territories, such as the urine and feces, and they breed in winter with a gestation period of about 2 months into spring. So they breed from winter into spring and have a gestation period of about 2 months. Really wonderful animals. And there's 2 subspecies recognized of these guys. There's kind of the Great Plains, the eastern bobcat and the western bobcat. And they're just so wonderful animals. Very common. And they have, I believe, yeah, they're just really awesome. So now, we're going to move on by last but not least, we've got an extinct animal. This was done by Noel Waller. We have got the dodo. So this is a really cool animal. So the dodo is an endemic flightless bird that is endemic to, it's extinct now, but it's endemic to Mauritius, which is east of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. So these guys was, believe it or not, their closest living relative, closest genetic relative was also the extinct Rodriguez solitrice. So that was from another island that was very close to these guys. And the closest living relative is the Nicobar pigeon, which lives in Southeast Asia. So these guys kind of flew over, which is really weird. And these guys got pretty big too. They were, this is an example of island gigantism and also paedomorphism, which means that they kind of retain juvenile characteristics. So they kind of look like a giant baby pigeon, but it's still a really cool example of evolution. They got up to about 1 meter tall and weighed between 10 and 17 kilograms in the wild. And we actually know what they look like because people in the Dutch in the 16th century, they painted them, and some illustrations we got, this is what they kind of looked like. They kind of had this really cool pattern to them. And even though their exact appearance is unresolved, we do have some evidences. So it looks like they had these like brownish grey plumage with yellow feet, a tuft of tail feathers, and a grey naked head and a black yellow-green beak. And they also use gizzard stones to help digest food, which is thought to include fruits in their main habitat, and to be the woods and dry coastal areas of Mauritius. And they tend to have single eggs from accounts that we have from people that saw them. And they're presumed to be flightless because of the readily available food sources and absence of predators on Mauritius. So the first recorded mention of the dodo was by Dutch sailors in 1598, and the following years the birds were hunted by sailors and invasive species, such as pigs and things like that. And the last accepted sighting of the dodo was in 1662. And it was not immediately noticed, and sometimes it was considered a myth, sadly. And by the 19th century, they were concluded on a small quantity of remains of 4 specimens that were brought to Europe in the early 17th century. That sucks. But they are still really interesting animals. I just love dodos. It's really cool that we got like a nice accurate one for Planet Zoo as well. And one of the really cool things about dodos is that they're just so cool. I love it. I love it. And you can see like a general trend with these guys. Birds that get on islands, they can tend to get big, and they tend to evolve. And they were just naive. So a lot of people report like walking up to them and hitting them. And it's not because they were dumb. That's you get the phrase "dumb as a dodo." They weren't dumb. They were just not used to people attacking them. They kind of lived on a predator-freeless place. They were the big herbivores. They were kind of the equivalent to the big moa or the elephant birds of Madagascar. They were the big herbivores of the area, and they didn't really have any risks. And plus, they also breed slow. As I mentioned, they have single eggs. So it's most likely that they were just not used to people. They were not used to hunting, and sadly went extinct because of it. But I really love this mod. I'm really a big fan of this. So I think this would be a good place to end the video. So yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to click that little bell icon to get notified when I upload anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.